there's like these various skills, right? The core skills, so business skills. So part of that is like, how do you apply a concept, right? Your own idea, in this case, the business that you would create. Entrepreneurship is part of that. Decision making and communication and collaboration. So all these things related to business. And then when we look at like the particular units, this gives us kind of the course at a glance. Little descriptions here. So when you see this where it says the 37 class periods, that's based on if we were going to meet every single day, how much time will we spend on it? But I think we can condense it down enough that we'll be good with what we have. So like this is unit 1, like businesses, competition, new ideas for businesses. Unit 2 is marketing. Unit 3, personal savings. That's another big part of it, is the sort of personal finance part of this class. And then business finance, management strategies, personal goals, budgeting. So those are the general, went too far. This is a general overview of the units. This is the business canvas project guide. So this is really like telling us what we need to do, that like the whole second half of the exam, I guess is not really technically an exam because you're creating this business, but then you kind of have to defend it. So it is sort of an exam. So this gives us like the overview of what the business canvas project is asking us to do, what the goals are, what the description of it is, sort of like our vision for that, what we should be doing in each unit in order to continue creating this goal. So I think that this is pretty helpful if you need it. If you don't, that's fine. I'll tell you what you need to do. And so that's the general overview of the CED. If anybody's interested, you can just Google this. It is topic 1.3. Remember, the College Board separates these courses into topics. So it's 1.3. We're going to be describing Pestel and the business environment. And up to this point, we've really focused on the internal anatomy of a business, how to problem solve, how to do value creation, competitive advantage. But businesses don't necessarily operate in a vacuum. And so what we kind of want to do is look at it through like this real dynamic, chaotic external environment. So like what influences a business? And so we're going to try and, I think, master the Pestel framework. The Pestel framework is kind of the gold standard for scanning on the macro level. And if we're separating these ideas, so like the macro is the big picture, while a micro would be a small picture idea. So kind of what is the big picture idea that we're looking for in this macro environment? So just keep your guided notes that I put up there handy, and I think it's going to be helpful in terms of defining and figuring out how to navigate our way through all this. So I don't think we need to read through all these, but this is what the College Board put up, and I just sort of copied and pasted it over. This is like just sort of like what I thought about this is like, as future managers, investors, entrepreneurs, maybe sharks one day, you got to understand how like these big picture forces really move the business landscape underneath your own feet. So for example, political decisions like taxes, subsidies, that completely changes the profitability of an industry. An economic factor might be like, economic stability will directly dictate what people can buy from your company. And if you don't have a grasp of those external forces, your business can be wiped out overnight by stuff that's completely out of your control. So I think today we're going to try and learn how to anticipate those external factors rather than just reacting to them after they start happening to us. So some more of these learning objectives beyond sort of like political and economic factors. We're going to look at technology, environmental factors, legal factors, how they shape our businesses or our potential for businesses. Particular regions, they're called the Pestel profiles, how that determines what industries can thrive, and that dictates what jobs are available. So in addition to being business people or entrepreneurs, you are create job creators. When these pastel factors change, careers can change for everyday people. Like, for example, during some sort of like macroeconomic contraction, you see a lot of structural change in labor markets that leads to a lot of layoffs, especially in like weaker sectors, and it drives massive hiring waves in like other sectors, highly resilient ones. So what our goal is application. We're not just going to memorize these definitions. We're going to try and apply Pastel to evaluate how attractive the potential for our market will be. We're going to examine how businesses evaluate market opportunities. We're going to do that by aligning their resources and production processes with those sort of external macro factors. For example, one of the cutting edge tech startup, or sorry, think of a cutting edge tech startup that might need cheap, high speed fiber internet infrastructure. But like on the other hand, like a farm to table style restaurant needs like a localized, sustainable supply chain. So those are the kinds of things we're going to be looking at from this real macro level. That's better. So if you go through this with me, pastels, you're like, well, what does he keep saying this term? Like, what does that term mean? Well, they are broken down. I love acronyms. I told you last week that I teach a number of different classes, mostly in the social studies. So I do U.S. history, and I know you're mostly Canadians in this class, but I do U.S. history. I'm really good at that. I do world history. I just enjoy that a lot. And one of the big things that we do in there is acronyms because I think they help us remember better. So my first favorite acronym for this business class here is PASTEL. So we're not trying to memorize useless information, but I think that knowing this acronym will help us. It's our roadmap moving forward. So it's kind of like an ultimate checklist almost for some kind of strategic planning. If you ignore one of these letters when you're creating your own business, you're leaving behind a massive blind spot in your strategy. So we'll start here with the first one. The first one is P, political. And I feel like I've been going pretty fast. Uh, how are we feeling about it? I got one shaking head, one thumbs up, two thumbs up. I love it. All right. So our first one, political. So political factors are the policies and political dynamics that shape your market activity. The first element you're looking at in political analysis is political instability. Is the government you're working under pro-business or is it more volatile? Sometimes when there's upcoming elections, could that possibly flip the entire regulation regime, right? So political instability is a major factor in thinking about starting a business. Next, we have trade restrictions and tariffs, especially in the United States right now. Tariffs are a huge ordeal. I don't know if you all are familiar. I am American, and my president currently is a guy called Donald Trump, and he really likes tariffs. And so that's something that's been, tariffs have always existed. Tariffs, again, are taxes on imports. But tariffs have existed, but they're just like very popular all of a sudden, and in a way that they hadn't been for a couple of decades. Tariffs on imported raw materials, steel, microchips, whatever. If you see new tariffs like this, that can instantly destroy your profit margin. So trade restrictions, tariffs are a big part of political analysis here. Tax policy is another massive issue to deal with. Governments use taxes to fund themselves, but they also use them to create incentives or to disincentivize specific behaviors. We can think of examples of that as we go along, right? But when you live in a I guess, a more socialist leaning country, think of like the Scandinavian countries, you see higher taxes. When you live in more, I guess, capitalist friendly countries, you see lower taxes in general, not always. But in the United States, businesses pay a lot less tax than they do in a place like Denmark. So there's, tax policy does influence what you can and can't do as a business in some cases. Finally, here we have mandates and bans. A mandate is it forces a company to adopt a practice. For example, having to acquire a certain percentage of its energy from renewable resources. Things like companies having to use 50% of their power being generated by solar farms or wind power rather than just oil and coal. And so that if you're mandated by the governments by policy uh, to uh, to use renewable energy, that forces you to adopt that practice. So that's a mandate, and then bans, kind of similar, can eliminate an entire product category overnight. Think recently in the last couple of years, single-use plastics have been coming under fire, especially straws, for example. When you go to restaurants now, you don't see quite as many plastic straws as you once did. We're moving towards a more paper uh, heavy straw. So if you were a straw producer, right, that policy really influenced what you could do in your business. So kind of as we're going along in your guided notes there under political, make sure that you have some of these kind of written down and you have a good idea of just the general thinking behind them. Thumbs up, thumbs down. I love thumbs. So our next in the pastel. So P is for political, E is for economic. So let's talk about E for a second, economic factors. When we look at economic stability, typically we measure that by the GDP growth. So GDP is gross domestic product. That is how much is produced sort of around the nation. So in Canada, for example, your GDP will be measured by the entirety of Canada's produce in a particular year, right? An increasing GDP means that the economic engine of your country is going well. Market demand is rising. The engine is humming, as it were. Now, GDP often directly links to levels of household income. If the gross domestic product of the entire nation is doing well, on the individual level, you're probably doing a little bit okay for yourselves too. When consumers have high disposable income, they are able to increase their discretionary spending on non essentials, on luxury items. But when wages stagnate, consumer behavior really shifts back towards essential and discount brands. So I feel like I'm throwing around a lot of SAT words, if you will. If I say anything and you're like, I'm not sure exactly what that means, make sure you let me know so I can explain it out, okay? So things like disposable income, are you comfortable with that or not comfortable with like stuff like that? Some comfort? All right, I'll go with some comfort. Send me a little direct message. I always hated asking questions in class in case, because I didn't want to look stupid, but feel free to look stupid. I look stupid more than anybody, and it's okay. Okay. So that's your levels of household income, high disposable income, wage stagnation, inflation rates. Inflation, right? We're, man, a lot going on with inflation these days, especially the further south you go. Inflation is the rate at which the purchasing power of money falls. High inflation takes away from the real value of every dollar you earn. That forces consumers to pull back, while low inflation stabilizes real wages and preserves purchasing power. So when you have high inflation, you cannot buy as much. When you have low inflation, you can buy things, right? You can buy a lot more. Thinking about inflation, if you buy a loaf of bread from Tim Hortons or wherever you shop, and it cost $5 for a loaf of bread in 2016 because inflation was pretty low in 2016. You go back there today, and the loaf of bread, and I'm just making up these numbers, costs $10 because of inflation. Well, if you need two loaves of bread, that's going to be twice the price, right? So that economic uh, part of this Pestel analysis, right? There's a real influence there. People can't buy as much if inflation is high. You can't buy as much if wages are stagnant, right? But on sort of the other side of that, if inflation is down, if disposable income is up, you can sell a lot more of your product. Excuse me. So we've gone through political and economic. Here's a little, I love a good graph here and there. So this one shows us, it's called a real wage growth chart. And so kind of putting in a little bit of real data into this one. I found this on the AP College Board website, and I thought it was a good chart to illustrate what we're looking at here. It shows real wage growth in the United States. I know we're living in Canada, but in the United States, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little United States centric for a second. This shows us wages adjusted for inflation. So can you see that there's a little bit of a divergence between income groups over the last couple of decades? As a business leader, why would you care about this? You might be wondering. Well, if you're targeting middle or low wage earners and their real wage growth is flat or minimal, you can't expect them to absorb price increases, right? You have to optimize your supply chain to keep costs low, or your product will not be affordable to the people you're trying to sell your product to. If you're trying to sell toilet paper and people just don't have as much spending power as they once did, you cannot increase the price of your, store brand toilet paper and expect people to keep buying it if their wages haven't gone up. So these are things to keep in mind as we're going through this. A little bit of social analysis here. So if we're just looking at our next, so I want to should put this everywhere, political, economic, and now we're on to social. I didn't mean to click that. Social analysis. So let's look through this. On the letter S, social factors. These are cultural, demographic trends that kind of dictate what consumers want and how they behave. So demographics, to use, I guess, another SAT word here, demographics, it just generally means people, right? If we're looking at, we break down English if we can. Demo comes from the Greek, it means people. So demographics is talking about people and population growth. That's critical here. If you have an aging population and demand for healthcare and retirement services go up, while demand for elementary school products goes down, that's something to be to be aware of, right? So you're looking at these different trends, how people spend their time and money. Lifestyle trends, cultural norms, they will help shift demand. For instance, a growing social focus on health consciousness has really transformed the food and beverage industry. Now, you all are too young to remember this, but when I was growing up, McDonald's used to have a supersize meal. Now we just have small, medium, and large. When I was about your age, they had supersizes, but because sort of this growing social focus on that health consciousness, they got rid of the supersize option. It just seemed remarkably unhealthy. And so people just stopped doing it, stopped buying it. McDonald's stopped producing it. And so we see these kind of massive shifts in buying habits. Younger consumers, Gen Z people like you're all Gen Z, I assume. You tend to increasingly prioritize ethical sourcing, sustainable packaging, and even moving entirely from ownership to access, right? That's fueled this sharing economy, as it were. So, like the idea of sharing, I guess, your Netflix subscriptions, sharing your whatever else you subscribe to, Spotify, I suppose. Those buying habits, that's part of the social analysis here. So we've gone through PES, of our pestel, and then our next is the T, technology, technological factors. Technology is generally the engine of disruption. Automation and robotics, they're continuously shifting production from expensive manual labor to highly efficient machine outputs. You see this basically everywhere in industry. Artificial intelligence, you know that better as AI and data analytics. Companies are using algorithms to predict demands. They're using algorithms to optimize supply chains. They are using algorithms to personalize marketing at scale. They are doing all this with even before we were super familiar with artificial intelligence, with AI, companies were doing this. Research and development activity has been, for the last 100 years or so, R&D, as it were, activity, uh, sort of like creating new patents, creating new ideas, creating new items, comes from research and development, R&D. That's part of this technological analysis in the pestel. All of this relies on technological infrastructure. If a region doesn't have high speed internet or huge cloud computing resources, high tech businesses probably aren't going to go to that particular place. Uh, Final one here, the rate of obsolescence. In tech heavy sectors, how quickly does a product become outdated? If your product life cycle is 18 months, you have to constantly reinvest in innovation just to survive in your company. I'm not talking necessarily just about, new models of the iPhone, right? You go through, excuse me, you go through your iPhones pretty quickly, but they're still doing the same thing. I'm talking here about if maybe your business is the creation of an app, and you've created this app that helps people figure out how to raise their children more efficiently. Well, it's not going to last super long if you don't constantly reinvest that app. You're going to lose. You're going to go obsolete. You're going to become outdated. These things happen. I can't think of a specific example that's happened necessarily in your lifetime, but maybe think about Facebook for your generation. When I was in college, Facebook was everything. Every young person was on Facebook. Now it's just old people. I'm barely on Facebook anymore because I'm not that old. It's become outdated. Everybody uses Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok, right? Uh, Same thing happens with different technologies, right? In my lifetime, when I was growing up, we used VHS videotapes to watch movies. Then we switched to DVDs. Now everything is streaming, and I don't even think I have a DVD player anymore. DVDs, VHS tapes, VCRs are outdated. They're obsolete. So part of the pestel here is that technological influence. So we've been through some of the PEST. How about E? Environmental analysis. So uh, our E here, environmental factors, this has shifted from a public relations footnote almost to a core strategic priority. Climate change, extreme weather events, floods, wildfires, hurricanes, they pose immediate physical threats to the global supply chain, right? These things happen. I mean, certainly there are other things that pose those threats, but environmental factors, more than they did 50 years ago, 30 years ago, even 20 years ago, environmental factors are really influencing the global supply chain. Hurricanes are getting bigger, right? Wildfires are becoming more severe, long lasting. Kind of at the same time, governmental environmental regulations, things like carbon taxes, waste management laws, they directly increase the cost of carbon heavy operations. If you have to burn a lot of coal to make your product, that's not super popular anymore. And most governments are really clamping down on that. So this is driving like this sort of massive transition towards sustainability and what's called the circular economy. That's where products are designed to be recycled or refurbished rather than just thrown away. Think about your cell phone, right? You usually don't throw that away. When you get a new one, you send it back and it's recycled or refurbished. So those are kinds of things that are part of environmental factors, the environmental analysis. And then this resource scarcity, of course, like the depletion of rare earth minerals or fresh water, right? Things are running out. Not at a tremendous rate, but there are things that are running out. It forces companies to innovate. They have to create alternative materials, or they have to face soaring costs to buy those materials. Just think about, the last World War, right? In the United States, fabric was at a premium. And so synthetics, polyester is created as a direct result of the sort of scarcity of cotton during the Second World War. So we have to plan for resource scarcity as we're thinking about our businesses. And then finally, like the shift towards renewable energy that changes both our company's cost structure and our reputation. Do you want to buy from a company that's killing the earth? I certainly don't. I would think you wouldn't, but maybe you do. So that's something that you got to take into account when you're thinking about your company. So look at this. Look at this. So I think that this little campfire here is a real symbol for resource consumption, for energy consumption. For about a century now, industrial businesses burns resources with very little regard for long-term environmental fallout, right? Today, that kind of fire is very heavily regulated. Every unit of energy a business consumes and every ounce of waste it produces is now under intense scrutiny from regulators and from consumers. So you're looking at like the government's sort of that political portion, and also like from people, from that social portion of these pastel factors. So managing your environmental footprint is not just about doing good. It's about making sure that you aren't going to get in trouble with the governments. It's going to make sure that consumers are still going to come to you for a product because you're environmentally aware. So that's PEST. How about our PESTE. How about our final L here? Legal analysis. So finally, we have this L, legal factors. This is the mandatory box within which a business must legally operate. It's slightly different from the political one, right? So that's just kind of policy. Here in this legal analysis, like these are things that we don't have a choice in. It's mandatory stuff. First, employment law, minimum wage laws, right? Having to pay overtime, workplace safety through agencies like OSHA, right? These are things that you just cannot ignore. Consumer protection laws exist. They mandate that we have to clearly label our products, and we cannot be deceptive when we're advertising. You probably read this when you get into your literature classes at some point. In the United States, I guess everywhere, but in the United States, especially about 120 years ago, there was very little government regulation. And the book that you're going to hear about, if you haven't heard about it already, The Jungle, by a guy called Upton Sinclair, he wrote about sort of like the horrible conditions of the meatpacking industry in Chicago, where people would lose fingers while they're cutting up pork, and the fingers would end up in the pork. And so it's, we have laws that protect us from that kind of thing happening today. But it took some time to get around to these consumer protection laws. Anywhere, basically in North America, where you go to buy fruits and vegetables, they have to be labeled. If your product is coming from Brazil, it has to be labeled as Brazil. If you're eating bananas, look at the little sticker on the banana. It'll say it's coming from Costa Rica, right? So we have to have these labels. We cannot say that a banana is an apple in our advertising. It just can't work that way. Consumer protection laws exist. Antitrust, competition laws exist. They're there to prevent monopolies. They're there to prevent price fixing. They're there to prevent predatory behavior by companies. Intellectual property laws, IP laws exist. They're there to protect our company's patents, our trademarks, and copyrights. It's also going to protect other companies from us infringing on their patent or trademark or copyright. In the digital age, which we live in now, data protection, privacy law. In Europe, there's something called the GDPR, is like this sort of continent wide protection law, right? You can't really get around it. People are protected on the internet in a lot of places. There are state level privacy acts. They dictate how we as companies can collect, how we can store, how we can monetize people's data. Compliance is expensive, but the cost of non-compliance, lawsuits or class action suits, massive government fines, they can bankrupt us pretty quickly. So that's your PESTEL factors, right? PESTEL, political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal. Here we go. Let's put your knowledge to the test, huh? I want you to look at this scenario for a company called the Eco Drone Delivery Systems, or EDDS. They use autonomous solar powered drones to deliver medical supplies and organic groceries. There are 8 real world variables on this slide. In a real class, I would say partner up with a neighbor, take a couple minutes to try and classify them. But if you could, I would like you in your heads to just figure out, does inflation go in the political? Does inflation go in the legal? Does it go in the environmental? Just see where you think that these should go. Just think about that, share it in the chat, or you're welcome to come off mute and talk with each other.
Sorry, could you please repeat again?
So yeah, looking at these variables, inflation, climate events, air traffic laws, government grants, all these in red here, where would they go? So these are our PESTEL factors. Where would inflation go? Is that a political consideration? Is that a economic, social, technological consideration? So we're trying to match them up here.
Thank
Okay, so we got a couple answers in the chat. As you've been sort of sitting here thinking about it, I just wanted to kind of just tell you the answers so you can kind of see if you were thinking in the right direction. So I'm trying to match. So inflation, I would put that under political factor right there. Inflation, global inflation causing things to causing the price of lithium batteries to skyrocket. That's political, I think. Climate events, I would put that under environmental, which I believe a couple of us did. Yeah. Thank you, Joanna. I would put climate events in sort of like the increase in super typhoons, right? That's climate change, basically, climate events. So that's economic. I would put air traffic laws, right? Looking at law, I would put that in the legal section. Hmm. I'd put that in legal right there, the air traffic laws. Government grants, I might put that up in the political. There is some overlap, I think, between political and legal, but I would stick government grants in the political section right there. AI breakthroughs. AI breakthroughs, obviously, I think is technological, right? Pretty easy to think about there. Data privacy. Thinking about data privacy, put that into the legal framework. Also, it's about the government trying to keep you together, keep us all together. Consumer trends. I would say that that's social, right? Looking at the factors of people and what they're doing. Trade tensions, I might put trade tensions in that political category also. So it's kind of just something to think about as you're trying to factor these in. Thank you for sharing those in the chat. Your ideas there. So we have like sort of the reasons right here. I think that's a little helpful. All right, two more slides on this thing, but one more thing I kind of want to look at here, career opportunities and Pastel. So kind of to close up this PowerPoints, I want to connect Pastel, political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal directly to your future career opportunity. Local Pastel factors determine what businesses are viable in a specific location. If a state has strict environmental regulation, but a lot of green subsidies, it becomes a real hotbed for clean tech engineering jobs. When, pastel dimensions shift, like with the new technology disrupting an industry, entire job categories can vanish. Brand new ones are born, right? Don't need a lot of VCR repair people anymore. Do need a lot of internet installation people, though. Finally, right here, like during macro big picture economic downturns, businesses face contractions and widespread layoffs. If you understand Pastel is not just about managing a business, it's about managing your own career path, identifying where the future jobs will be, you're going to be in a much better place. This master table, and I will share these PowerPoints with you. This master table, I think, summarizes what we've been going over in here. It'll outline sort of the key areas, key focus areas, and the real strategic impact of each of these Pastel components. So before we transition to our case study, I want you to double check on your guided notes. Make sure you have the blanks filled in. If you missed anything, now is the time to copy it down from this table. How are we feeling? Thumbs up, thumbs down? 1 thumbs up, 2 thumbs up, 3 thumbs up, 4 thumbs up. My best review yet. All right. So if you, I didn't mean to close that. Oh, well, I can pull it back up if I need to. All right. If you were here last week, you remember that each week the College Board has put together, uh, oops, a series of case studies. So last week we looked at the Bombas, the sock company. You remember the sock company? And so they're creating their business. They've created their business with a mission in mind. We're not going to every week look at something quite as impressive as they were on Shark Tank, and they're a hugely profitable company now. Some weeks they have us look at less well-known cases. And so this week, Pestel Factors we're going to look at, it's called Corley Plumbing. So Corley Plumbing doesn't sound super exciting, but let's find out if it is. So we're going to move into this case study. This one's a pretty good real world study of a local family business that's navigated sort of the macro environmental shifts going on in the world since the year 2000. How did I make that last one? Yeah. Yeah, I'm figuring this out. I know how to do PowerPoints. Corley Plumbing, it is a local company. Actually originates in South Carolina, which is pretty close to where I am right now. Doesn't matter. They've been in business since the year 2000. And as we analyze this case, the Corley Plumbing, want to understand how external forces create massive openings and threats for local trades, for local companies. So the Pestel concepts, just keep an eye out for these concepts while we're going through this case. Okay, I'm not going to give you one to read on this week because, again, College Board hasn't published the class yet. So I've put it together as best I can without having the actual publication. So make sure we're keeping our Pestel glasses on. While we're looking at this, we're looking for specifically how local trade compliance, rising material costs, changing consumer tastes act as like this macroeconomic pressure on a small local company like Corley Plumbing. I'll go through this. Don't really have the thing to read right there. So, the origins of a local plumbing business. The two, a married couple, Stan and Carol Corley, they start this business in 2000. They have a simple formula for it: do meticulous, honest work, charge a fair price, rely entirely on word of mouth advertising. They have no computers, they have no credit card processing, they have no advertising. And today, their grandson, a guy called Cody Burgess, has earned his master license and is preparing to take over the business. But Cody faces a real challenge coming into this business that doesn't have any of those sort of what we might expect as big helping factors to create a business, to start a business. He wants to hire employees. He wants to broaden what they do at Corley. But as Cody pointed out, plumbers are quite literally responsible for the health of a nation by keeping clean water separate from wastewater. And so he joins this company to try and broaden what they do. Take a look at their original marketing assets right here on the right. That is their only, they don't have any advertising. Their only real advertising is a physical business card. It is a reflection, I think, of their old school relationship driven business model. But is a physical business card enough to sustain a business in this digital world that we live in now? I don't know. I think that's something that we might want to factor. So Corley Plumbing, well, we'll skip this one. Let's look at Corley Plumbing from this Pestel sort of vision, from this Pestel idea. Let's start with political, obviously, right? Government policies and environmental mandates have pushed the plumbing industry toward groundwater protection and energy conservation. That changed what fixtures, what methods were legally allowed to be installed by these plumbers. That forces local plumbers like the Corleys to constantly retrain and adapt. I'm sure you all are terribly familiar with the ins and outs of plumbing. but there are certain pipes that you cannot use anymore, right? That's politically motivated. Economically, economic uh, factors, right? Stuff costs more than it used to. I just looked for a copper pipe installation, and this is what came up. So, copper pipe in this sort of 20-ish year time span, it goes from $10 to $50 for a 10-foot copper pipe. A standard water heater installation in 2000 would run you about $500. Today, it's about $2,500. High inflation, supply chain disruptions, that squeezes profit margins, makes materials really expensive. So that's economic factors influencing the Corleys here. Sorry, the Corley company here. Under economic, we also can think about workers, right? What's the son's name? I forgot the grandson's name. Cody. Cody wanted to bring in some extra workers, thinking about bringing in skilled workers, right? I would argue that there's no such thing as an unskilled job, but you need a lot of plumbing people trained in plumbing in order to work here. So we might see something of a labor imbalance, real general macroeconomic threats. If there's not enough skilled trade workers and demand for plumbing is high, but the supply of young people entering the trade is low, that imbalance drives up the labor cost. It makes it really hard for Cody to hire new employees. So those are political and economic factors. There are social factors here too. Social shifts. Corey's traditional customer base is built on cash, checks, and the way you used to do business was with a handshake. If you talk to my grandparents, they would hire a plumber based on a handshake and good wishes. Today, we almost certainly always go through an app or website before we hire a plumber, right? Today's younger generation, real energy conscious homeowners, they want tankless water heaters. They want whole house filtration systems. They want smart water monitoring technology. They expect digital scheduling, credit card payments. Can't do it the way that the Corley company did it in the year 2000. Cash money isn't enough anymore. So Cody, the grandson, has to bridge this real cultural divide. On the technological front, tools have evolved. There's something called, I figured out, a ProPress system. ProPress system allows plumbers to join pipes together with hydraulic pressure rather than with what they're like open flame torches. It's safer, it's faster. The equipment is really expensive to do it. Cody is leveraging social media to try and build brand awareness beyond the traditional word of mouth. Tell your neighbors about this plumbing company. You see, I'm pointing to my screen like you can see where I'm pointing. You see here, I didn't know there was a new ride at Six Flags, right? He's jumped on, I assume this is Facebook or Twitter or something, X as it were. And so he's trying to build a new brand awareness. That's technological change. Environmentally, for environmental factors, water quality concerns, drought regulations, they've skyrocketed. The demand for smart, water efficient homes, they've skyrocketed, right? That's environmental factors. Cody had to optimize operations by recycling unused scrap metal during slow months because he wanted to minimize waste. He wanted to boost extra revenues. So he has to recycle any metal that he's not using. It's environmental factors there. So, legally, so that's environmental factors. Legally, plumbing is pretty highly regulated in most modern countries. Real legal complexity in this profession. Some pretty detailed codes, like the state amendments in many different areas to the international plumbing codes. They govern what plumbers do, how they can do it. Plumbers also carry some of the priciest commercial liability insurance in all of construction. If they make a single mistake, right, that'll cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in water damage. I should know. I tried to do a bunch of plumbing in my house myself. I didn't do very well. It cost us a lot of money for my stupidity. So plumbers, their job is it's important, right? And if they make a mistake, they're on the line for it. So they have these uh, real high liability insurance policies. That's part of the legal factors here. So if we're sort of looking at uh, how these Pestel factors, sort of opportunities, uh, threats, or are they both to your company? So in this case, for Corley Plumbing, political factors, those mandates for groundwater protection, for energy savings, that's an opportunity because young people are interested in these more efficient homes, energy saving homes, but that also costs a lot more money to the company. So that is a sort of both there. It's an opportunity and a threat. Economic factors, right? Copper prices going up, water heater, labor costs going up, worker shortages. That's a threat to the company. So there's a real economic threat to the company. Socially, a lot of energy conscious families. Not as much as the way they did it back in the old days, right? There's opportunity and threat here. It's both. Technologically, right? The ProPress, that makes things go faster. It's safer. Smart water, faster and safer. Social media, get your name out there. Card payments, there's opportunity there in the technological sector. Environmentally, right? There's opportunity and threat here, right? It's both. Legally, a lot of codes that you have to follow. Uh, Liability insurance is really expensive. So there's, opportunity, not as much here, a lot of threats in the legal area. So Pestel factors can be positives, they can be opportunities, they can be negatives or threats, they can be both. When we're thinking about the companies that we're trying to create here. So what should Cody do in the future is kind of like, what we're thinking of, right? These Pestel factors, there's opportunity, there's threats, there's both. Cody has a couple options. Option A, he can expand and modernize. He can hire employees. He can invest heavily in digital marketing. He can target high tech, eco conscious people who want to modernize their homes. Or option B, he can maintain the current scale, keep his operations small, protect those hyper loyal customers that he has, the ones who only pay cash, adapt slowly. Those are his options. In my mind, I was going to have you stand on the left side of the class and the right side of the class if we were together, but this is online, isn't it? So we're not going to stand up. But I want you to think, maybe type it in the chat. Should Cody go with A? Should Cody go with B? Well, what do you think he should do? Type it in the chat. I've talked too much. This will let us know if you've been paying attention. Okay, I've got a couple A's. Got another A. I got one for B. Does anybody want to say why? Yiming, are you trying to talk to us?
Uh, you means me?
Yeah.
Because the economic, because just technological is like the have the opportunity, but the economic situation is looks and the legal situation is not look so good. So I'm more like the about the maintain and adapt slowly because I think that's too much risk.
Thank you for sharing that. That's pretty insightful. I appreciate that. Ladies, have any thoughts? Why should he expand and modernize?
I think that if Cody expands and modernizes, his clientele well, his whole market will expand a lot more. And I think the opportunity to expand outweighs the risks.
Okay. Opportunity outweighs the threats. I love it, Sabrina. Eva, Joanna, anything to add, or are you good?
I think I chose A because like the tech every day the world is changing and if they still maintain it might be outdated and then if they have like like the example is like smart water filtration I think it will be better because now people know these things better if they only keep the old ways people might not think that they're like doing great even though like the old generation of people like knows them the new generation won't and the well, it depends on the new generation who wants to pay or not. So
Thank you for sharing that, Joanna. Eva, you're up.
Like similarly to Joanna and like Sabrina, I think um the new generation will move on and with like Corley's business and how these like cash I feel like the new generation's gonna move on too quick and like his business will get like forgotten.
I really appreciate you all sharing that. Thank you. So that's the Corley plumbing business. Our key takeaways from this, I just sort of wanted to, I didn't make the student handout, so don't worry about that. I was going to, but then I didn't. So our key takeaways from this, right? So our external forces rule here. Excuse me. External pestle forces, they completely shape the markets. You can't control them. Technological stuff, you can't really control because they're inventing it around you. Environmental stuff, nature's just going to nature. That's the way I'm going to say it. You can't control those. Legal forces, can't control that really. Social forces, can't really control what people want. They reshape the plumbing market, right? Business can't control that. Opportunities do open up though. New technologies, changing tastes. That's room for growth, right? Challenges exist also. Rising costs, strict codes that makes your business a little bit less profitable. It made the Corley business a little bit less profitable. Strategic success turns entirely on how businesses choose to respond to these pestle factors, to this.